Hello, welcome to today's Here's to Your Health podcast. I'm Don Lintzman, your host. My guest on the podcast today is Jill. She is a victims advocate at the Family Crisis Centers. And we're talking about this because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And Jill, thank you for taking time to visit with me today.
Sure.
So Jill, before we start, I want to make sure that everybody understands what Family Crisis Centers is and what it does. So can we take just a couple of seconds for you to describe that for us?
Sure. Family Crisis Centers is an agency that works with victims of domestic abuse, homicide, and other violent crimes, and we have a housing program. We're just there to help victims and help them through the abuse and the tough times they're going through.
And again, just in terms so that everybody understands what it is that we're talking about, when we talk about domestic violence, can you define that for us or give us a better explanation so that people understand what that is?
Sure. Domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behaviors within intimate relationships. This can include physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, financial abuse. It's all aimed at establishing and maintaining control over the victim.
And I think what's important, and I apologize for interrupting there, Jill, but I think what's important to remember about this is I think so many people think domestic violence is simply, if I can go back 50 years to when I was a kid, it's not wife beating. There's a lot of aspects to this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of emotional, psychological, which can be just as bad as the physical.
And in many instances worse. So the other question that comes up an awful lot when I ask people about domestic violence and are they active in trying to help prevent that, sometimes the question that comes up is why do victims return to their abusers or stay with their abusers? What's the psychology behind that?
Yeah, this is a quite common question. There are so many reasons, and it's individual for all victims. But fear, leaving is actually the most dangerous time for a victim, because as the abuser begins to feel they're losing control, the abuser begins to feel they're losing control of the victim, they may lash out and become more violent. And the abuser may threaten the victim's life or their family, or threaten to take the kids away if they leave. Sometimes the victim is afraid for the abuser to be alone with the kids if they were to separate. And other reasons can be low self-esteem or feeling like they don't have any other options. And some victims won't leave because of their culture or religious beliefs. The victim may think that abuse is normal. They don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. Sometimes it's because of the desire for things to be the way they used to be before the abuse started. And then some people lack the support they need or the financial resources to leave. And that's definitely where we can come in and help.
And what you just said is really sad. It's really sad to me, but I do understand, why those kinds of things happen. My guest on the podcast today is Jill from Family Crisis Centers. She's a victim advocate for Family Crisis Centers. And Jill, do abusers show any potential warning signs before they start their abusive behavior? Are there things that people could be looking for that would maybe be a tip-off to that sort of behavior?
Yes. A lot of abusers are pessimistic, negative. They're very jealous and controlling. Things usually start out slow, and it's the honeymoon phase, and everybody is happy and in love, and then just slowly starts to control and isolate the victim, monitoring their calls and their texts and their social media, and never taking responsibility for their own actions, always blaming the victim.
Is it possible? I'm sorry, go ahead, Jill.
Oh, I would. Yeah, they destroy their self-esteem, putting them down, humiliating them, making them feel like everything's their fault.
And again, unfortunate. Is it possible that abusers can change their behavior?
Well, Don, we all want to believe that someone we love will change, or things will go back to the way they were when we first met them. But it takes time, motivation, professional help, and a lot of willingness to change. And that's why statistically it is very rare for an abuser to change.
Yeah, I would think, just in my own experience, one thing that's, once you're locked into a pattern of behavior, which is what ends up in abusive relationships, is very difficult to deviate from that for lots of different kinds of reasons, but the psychological reasons behind all of that are a big part of it. You just don't see that you're doing anything wrong. You don't take any responsibility for any of the abuse that you're inflicting. And so if you can't take responsibility for it and you can't make up your mind to change your behavior, there's very little possibility that could necessarily be the case. One other thing
Right.
I want to talk about this morning, are men victims of domestic violence? I think there are a lot of people who think that it can't be that way, but I think maybe there aren't a lot, but there are some.
There actually are. Anyone can be a victim, and statistics show that 1 in 4 men will suffer some type of intimate partner violence in their lifetime.
That percentage is much higher than I would have guessed. That is much higher. I would have guessed something a little less than that, but that's an unfortunate statistic. My guest on the podcast today is Jill. She's a victim advocate from Family Crisis Centers, and we're talking about domestic abuse because October is Domestic Abuse Awareness Month, and we need to do all that we can in order to be able to help victims of domestic abuse. And speaking of helping victims, Jill, what sort of assistance is available through Family Crisis Centers if there's someone who's listening today who feels like they've been a victim of domestic abuse? We'll give them a phone number here in just a minute, but what sort of services can FCC offer?
I'll start by saying all of our services are 100% free and 100% confidential. And our main goal is to ensure the safety of the victim and to give them options. So some ways that we do this are helping to file protection orders, support and advocacy at the court hearings, going with them, being there for them, crime victim compensation applications. We do safety planning. We do individual crisis counseling where we can explore their options and provide emotional support. We also do child advocacy, and we can connect with community resources. We can provide transportation to a domestic violence shelter if that's what somebody is needing. And then we also have a housing program to assist in finding safe and affordable housing. So we offer financial assistance with a security deposit and rent for a limited period of time. And then we provide ongoing support to help maintain that housing and independence.
So if someone who is listening today thinks that you could be of service to them, how do they contact Family Crisis Centers?
We are available 24/7, including weekends and holidays. And the number is 1-800-382-5603, or you can text IOWAHELP to 20121. And then sometimes it's we have a website that's www.familycrisiscenters.org that also provides those numbers. If it sometimes it's hard to remember a number, but it's easier to remember the website. But either way you choose, you'll be connected with an advocate in your area who is there for you.
And finally, on the podcast today, Jill, one thing for those who are listening, if they're compelled in any way to help support Family Crisis Centers, either financially or as a volunteer, how do we go about doing that?
There are There's ways to do that. If you go to the website, it explains what you can do to volunteer. It explains how to make a donation. You can support our annual fundraiser, and then any kind of donations. When someone's fleeing, they may not have anything. So household items, furniture, things you're not using anymore, personal hygiene items. If you contact us, we can pick those things up and get them to people who need them.
And I would encourage people to get involved. I know that Family Crisis Centers does receive some financial assistance from the court system, but it's not enough to cover their expenses. So any private contributions are greatly desired. Again, the contact for Family Crisis Centers, you can go to familycrisiscenters.org. That's all one word, familycrisiscenters.org. You can call the number 1-800-382-5603, or you can text IOWAHELP to 20121. And Jill, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it very much.
No problem, Don. Thank you.
My guest on the podcast today has been Jill from Family Crisis Centers. Jill is a victim advocate, and we've been talking about domestic violence because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I'm Don Lintzman, your host for the Here's to Your Health podcast. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.